This is Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Tes Zayin, and we are holding on Tes Vavam Beis on the second wide line as we quote the end of the Mishnah. And once again, we like our learning to be an incredible Zchus Refuah Shalema for Tinaik ben Miriam Ahuva. So we quote the end of the Mishnah that Bezdin Mahalchin, that Bezdin walks after them, literally, Ushtei Toidois Achareyam, and the two Toidais are after them. So clearly, what does it sound like? Says the Gemara, Limimra, this seems to say the Bezdin Kami Toida Azli. Sounds that it's the Bezdin, and then the carbon Toida. But asks the Gemara, but the pasuk in the Nehemiah says, "V'acharei Moshiach v'chatzi sarei Yehuda," and the Shia and after those of Yehuda walked after them after the carbon taida. So it sounds like what was last, not the taida. V'achi kamar, says the Gemara. You know what the Mishnah means on the fourth Y line? Bezdin mahalchin ushtei taidais mahalchais. Bezdin mahalchin, Shtei toidos mahalchin, ubezdin achareim. The Bezdin walks, and the Kaihanim they carry the Toida walks, and the Bezdin is behind them. Says the Gemara, Kitzad mahalchis. How do the two Toidais walk? What is the position, and what is the absolute choreography? Says Gemara, Chivra of Shimon Rebbe Chanam Zekin Agedzeh. One says one next to the other, v'chad amar, and another says zeh. Chad amar zu. V'chad amar one more time. Chad amar zu keneged zu, v'chad amar zu achar zu. So says the Gemara, we're covered up. There we go. Man damar zu keneged zu. Hapenim yezach de mikar v'lechaim. The inside one, says the Gemara, is the one closest to the Bezdin. So Tanan, says the Gemara, let's go a little bit. So Tanan says the Mishnah, the Pinimius, the Taida that is closer to the inside is eaten and the outside is burnt. So Bishlam, if you're going to tell me if you're going to tell me that's one after the other, Amati Lachi, Pinimius Nachelas. Now I can understand why the inside one is eaten. The reason is the outer one comes, the Kama Vikachila, and sanctifies it. Three lines at the bottom. Zu Kineged Zu. But you're going to tell me that they're side by side. Tarvayu, Badi Adadi Kamikachi. So they're both equal, both at the same time. So why is the inside one any quicker to be in than the outside one? So explains the Gemara. Says the Gemara, one that says one after the other. Does one of them sanctify? Can't be. The Mishnah said that it's all or nothing. So says the Gemara, how could it be? Again, we're discussing how we can be Mekadesh, this addition to the Heichal. Even according to Mandarma that says any one of these suffices to create this Haisafa to the Azara. But both of them are part of one mitzvah. So how could it be that one is Mekadesh before the other? So as we turn over to Tezayin Amid Aleph, explains Rav Yechlan. Alpi Navi Necheles, Valpi Navi Nisrefes. It all has to do with the tzivoy of the Navi, as Rashi explains. Chagi Zachariah Malachi Ayusham. And there's no necessarily sensible reasoning for this. The Mishnah ended off that anything that was not done with everything, the whole list that the Mishnah spoke about, the Bezdin, Urim Mitumim, the Shnei Taidais, etc., then if subsequently one comes in while he's Tameh, is not Chayiv, because the area doesn't get the Kedusha. Itmar Ravuna Amar B'chol Eilu Tanan Rav Nachman Amar B'achas B'chol Eilu Tanan Ravuna Amar B'chol Eilu Tanan. Why? Because Savar Kedusha Rishayna Kitchel Shaita V'Kitchel Asilavai. The original Kedusha stands forever. The Ezra Zichar Baal Mo David, and Ezra Navi, when he was Mekadesh Yushalayim by the Beis Hamikdash Hasheni, it's a Zichar Ba'alma. Whereas Hu David Rav Nachman Amar B'achas Kol Elu Tanan K'sav Kedusha and Kitchel L'Shem Devaloi Kitchel Asalavai, and therefore needs a new Kedusha. The Ezra Kedusha Kaddish, he himself is one that is making a Kaddish. Aval Gav D'Lavi Urim V'Tumim, even though there was no Urim V'Tumim. So what do we see? We see that Ezra, that all the requirements listed by the Mishnah are not necessary to create this Kedusha that answers up that Shita in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, you see, Rav Nachman, the Brisa said, the Mishnah Koshlas b'cholelu, so he answers, Tini b'achs b'cholelu. Tashima, another riot to Ravuna, Bashalai Mishnei B'tzayin Behara Mishcha. There were two marshes on the Hara Mishcha. Tachtoin of Elyoina, Tachtoin in his kachu, B'cholelu, Elyoina in his kachu, B'cholelu. The bottom one is Mekadesh with everything that we spoke about in the Mishnah, and not the bottom one. Ella, Ba'oile Goyla. The bottom one is only Mekadesh, those who came up from Galus. Shalei b'melech, v'shalei b'urim v'tumim. It was not done by the melech urim v'tumim. Tachtoina sheitz kedusha gemura. So the bottom one has full kedusha. Therefore, amaratz nechlas l'sham eichel l'sham kachim kalim. Avaloi meiser sheni. Chaverin eichel l'sham. They can even eat kachim kalim. Or meiser sheni. V'aliyoin the tabo shleis kedusha gemura doesn't have full kedusha. Therefore, amaratz nechlas l'sham eichel l'sham kedush kalim. Avaloi meiser sheni. The chaverin ein eichel sham like it shemkalim l'meiser sheni, because it does not have real kedusha. Ne'emar like it shua. Why l'maisa was it not sanctified entirely? Shein ma'isiven al ir v'lazara. How, as our Mishnah taught, al b'melech v'navi v'urim v'tumim v'sanen shalayin alush te'taydes u'shir v'ulema kidshua. And to what is it? So with what do they mikadesh it if it didn't have all of these? L'mak Yeshua, ha'amrit, like Yeshua, ella, l'machli, ella, ha'amrit, like Yeshua. You just told me they were not mikadesh it. Ella, l'machli, suah. So why do they bring it into the city? What was the whole purpose? Minei, says the Gemara, Shatarvus Yerushalayim Ma'isa. It was a point of Yerushalayim that was exposed. It was easy to be conquered. Misham. Therefore, there was almost a fake, a quasi adding this area onto Yerushalayim, but it did not actually have the kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara, what do we see from this brisa? We see clearly that it was b'chol eileh, because once it didn't have everything, the brisa says there's no real kedusha. So says the Gemara, a straight up kashan Rav Nachman, that says you don't need b'chol eileh. Answers the Gemara in the first line. I heard that when they were building the Eichal, to make curtains for both. They built on the inside, thereby showing that there was actually kedusha. Says the Gemara, Amar Revi Yeshua, delving a little bit deeper into the kedusha that was. Amar Rabbi Yeshua, a fascinating din. Shamati shemakrivin avabi she'ein bias. You could bring a carbon even without the Beis Hamikdash. Oichlin kachay kachin avabi she'ein avabi she'ein klayim. Even though there are no curtains. Kachay kalim amaisin she'ein avabi she'ein chayim. Why? For the reason that we just said. There's still kedusha there. So says the Gemara, does it not imply that Eliezer holds that it is not kitchel asalavai? Says the Gemara, Amar le Ravina le Ravashi. Says Ravina to Ravashi, Mimai. Dilma de Kuli Alma, perhaps everyone knows Kitcher Rishani, Kitcher L'Shayta, Kitcher L'Asalavai. And therefore, if that was the case, so what's the machlek? As we're trying to prove it's a Tanai. So how can everyone know Kitcher L'Shayta, Kitcher L'Asalavai? Umar, Umar Dishvili Kamer, Umar Dishvili Kamer. You're being a raya based on that which each one said. Maybe they're just repeating what they heard. V'chi tema. But if that was the case, then we have a problem. Because kalayim l'Ravlazar l'amali. What's the purpose of the kalayim? Why do you need the curtains? If the kedusha is no longer there, then we can say that the kalayim, the curtains, create it. But if the original kedusha is still there, what is the purpose of the curtains? Says the Gemara, it's not a kasha. Perhaps let's use the ba'alma. Maybe the curtains there is just for tznius. So says the Gemara, we don't have a raya that it's a machlekes tanoim. So continues the Gemara, lahani tanoi, I'll show you different tanoim. Titania, we learned in a brayso from Yishmael b'Rav Yosi, lama manu chachamim es elu shekishalu b'nei hagoyla. Lama, what's the reason why manu chachamim es elu? Did the chachamim count the cities? These are the cities that are surrounded by a wall. Mukafes chayma b'mais Yeshua shekishalu b'nei hagoyla, because when they went up from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael with Ezra, Matu Elu, they found these Vikitcham and they were Mekadesh them. Aval Rishainais, but the original ones, but the original Kedusha, Batlu, Misha Batla Aretz, once the earth was Batal, once it no longer were in the land. So Alma, what do we see from this Brisa? So this is going to be our second shita, our shita holding that it's like kitchalas. Continues the Gemara over a mini. I'll ask you a stira. Was it only these? Only these cities, the 8 cities that are listed there in the Mishnah are Mekevas Chaima, B'Yemais Yeshua Benon. But is it really only these? V'haloi Kvar Nemar, but it says Shishim Ir. Says the pasuk 60 cities. Kol Chevel Argoig, Mamleches Oig, Babashan. The entire area of Argoig, the Malchus of Oig Babashan. And the psukim continue. Kol Eile Arim B'Tzureis Chaima Gavaya. All these were cities fortified with high walls. And if that's true, so why were these 8 listed and spelled out? Kitcham, says the Gemara. But they don't need to be mekudash. Ella, you know what it means? The Brisa means matzu elu. They found these umanam and they listed them. Continues the Brisa. Any city that you have a Messiah that watch a Mukafetz Chaima Mimais Yeshua bin Nun, call mitzvahs elu na'agisba. If you have a Messiah that has a wall back Bismani Yeshua bin Nun, then what? Call mitzvahs elu na'agusba. All the mitzvahs of a Mukafetz Chaima of all city are naigin it. So Kasha de Rav Yishmael, Rav Yisrael, Rav Yaisi. So answers the Gemara, Ema Trei Tanaya, leave with Rav Yishmael, Rav Yaisi. So now we see that we have 2 Tanayim. Iba Yisei Machad Minay Rav Yaisi Amra. Titania Rav Yaisi Aimer Asher Lo Chayma Aval Bishayin Lo Yachshav Lo Kaidem Lachain. But there was a wall prior. And that wraps up whether there is or is not a machlekes tanoim as to whether Kitcher Rishayna was indeed Kitcher Lasalavai or not. And we turn over to Tazayim and Beis, and we once again quote the Mishnah. Nitma ba'azara v'nelmu mimenu toma. That if one became Tomei in the Azara and he was Nelmu, he forgot the fact that he was Tomei. Says the Gemara, Tama Azara Minalim. What exactly, where do we know that there's Tama in the Azara? You could be Chayiv. And Rashi speaks out, Mishanintu Ba'azara Minalim de Bechayiv, you came Tama in the Azara. How do you know that you're Chayiv? V'lo Karina v'lo Yitamu es Machaneim Shekvar Timu. So says the Gemara Rav Elazar, I'll explain to you. Because of Echad Aimer es Mishkan Hashem Timei. So we have two psukim, and therefore what do we learn out? Says the Gemara. 1 second. Really? Is the pasuk extra? Meaning the whole lima that you're telling me is from this extra pasuk. But says the Gemara, it's not true. We need the pasuk to Tanya. Says Rav Elazar, Im Nemar Mishkan, Lama Nemar Mikdash, V'Nemar Mikdash, Lama Mishkan, Lama Nemar Mishkan. Eilu Nemar Mishkan, V'Lemar Mikdash. I would have said, Yisi Omer Al Mishkan Yechayiv. Shem Shach V'Shem Mishcha. The Mishkan was anointed with the Shem Mishcha. V'Al Mikdash Lo Yechayiv. V'Im Nemar Mikdash Lemar Mishkan. Yisi Omer would have said, Al Mikdash Yechayiv. Shem Kedusha Zaylam. V'Al Mishkan Lo Yechayiv. Lekach Nemar Mishkan, Lekach Nemar Mikdash. That's why both the psukim are saying both. So says the Gemara, both psukim are necessary. So ask the Gemara, you can't use one pasuk to teach us our din of Toma Basara. Answers the Gemara in the first white line. Rav Eliezer, when Rav Eliezer said that the psukim are extra and therefore you can learn out from this, this is what Rav Eliezer meant. Mechti. Let's see. On the first white line. Mishkan ikri mikdash and mikdash ikri mishkan. Nechtav, so could have written ID mikdash, ID mishkan. Why do you have to write both? They're the same thing. Mishkan u mikdash lamali. Why do the pasuk have to go and say one and then say the other? Shema mina tarti. So says the Gemara. Therefore, you know to teach us, it can teach us two different din. So says the Gemara, Bish, Lama Mikdash Eshki Mishkan, that I get. Techsev, Menasati Mishkani B'Seichem. Elo Mishkan Dikri Mikdash, which of course you could think these svaras, of course, a big Chedesh, as the Mishkan was many years prior. Minolan. Elim, they'll say, that's why I call him, they say, Mikdash. Ahuba Arinksiv, it's not about the Mikdash, it's about the Araim. Elo Me'acha, Vasili Mikdash, Echanti B'Seichem. Uksiv, Choshani Mara, Eschaz, Tavnich Mishkan, V'chulu. So we see that the two words are indeed used interchangeably. And we continue with the seventh wide line, the two dots, first one is coming in the chater and he bowed down, or he waited long enough to bow down, then he's chayiv. Says Rava, the Chachamar did not learn that you're chayiv for bowing down, only where you bow down towards the inside, towards the heichel. But if you bowed close outside shahin, if he waited around inside the Mishkan, then he is chayiv. Loi shah loi. Says the Gemara, Ika the Masla Seifa, some learn Rav in on the Seifa. That what? Says the Seifa, or he waited enough time to bow down. Mechlal. The shtachavaya gufa, it sounds like the bowing itself requires to also tarry, to also be inside the heichal for a specific amount of time. Amar Rava, and that is where Rava says, no. You're going to be chayiv. So says the Gemara, that's two different ways of how Rava is going to learn this thing. So says the Gemara, so we have two different types of ishtach havaya, two different types of bowing down. So says the Gemara, what does this mean? Hey, chidami ishtach havaya this beishehiyah, vechidami ishtach havaya the last beishehiyah. Perhaps a question that was bothering you. What does this mean? How do you have a bowing down that you were waiting, you did pause, you did tarry, and one that you did not? Explains the Gemara. The last beishehiyah zukriya ba'almahi. One that does not involve waiting is just kneeling. This beishehiyah is pisha yadayim v'raglayim. So what's coming out fascinating is that the code word almost is tarrying, is delaying. But the chi of the issue is pisha yadayim v'raglayim, full prostration. Says Marvakamish Yarshiyah. Plibar Visur Nachmeni Vachadi Ime Yomani Yershimin Bazi Vamlev Shimin Bazi Vachadi Mimon Visur Nachmeni Vamlev Shimin Nachmeni Vachada Omar Kimemrei. So it's Machlaikis who says this din, and what's the din? Chanam Rei Dai Psuka. One said it's as long as to say the following pasuk. Chad Amar, and one says, Kimi vayichru l'seifa. V'chol b'nei Yisrael royim b'radas ha'eish k'vod Hashem al habayis vayikar and they bow down apayim arza. Al ritzva v'yisachlu v'hoides l'Hashem ki toiv ki li'olam chastoy. To say that amount, that whole long pasuk, that is going to be what is called the amount of time for shehiyah, for waiting. So Tana Rabbanan, and with this we conclude different types of bowing. Kida, and we've learned about these back in Yuma, etc. Kida is alapayim, on one's face. Eretz. Kriya is albarkayim, on one's knees. All different types of bowing. I'll pick it up from here. B'siyata dishmaya.